Welcome back. For some Bronx residents, living near a highway has been a life-threatening situation, especially during COVID-19. Joining us now to share how air pollution may be linked to the risk of death from the coronavirus is Ese Olumhense. Ese is a reporter at the city. Ese, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. First, before we start, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the work you do at the city?
My name is Ese, as you said. I'm a reporter at the city where I cover the Bronx, which is where I'm from. I love writing stories that help people understand how systems in our lives fail us, how systems in our lives work, and how people participate and interact with some of these systems.
Thank you, Essay. And one of those systems is environmental justice here in the Bronx. You recently wrote a piece investigating how living near highways, particularly the Cross Bronx, may be linked to the risk of death from coronavirus. Can you please help us break down the relationship between air pollution and high COVID-19 deaths?
So mounting evidence is starting to suggest that poor air quality is linked to COVID-19 mortality. I was surprised to read in a study not very long ago that did a ranking and analysis of all of the counties in the United States. That's 3,000, 100 and something of them. And it ranked the Bronx, these scientists in this peer-reviewed study, ranked the Bronx as number one of all of these counties for COVID-19 death rate and for poor air quality. And they used an analysis of EPA, United States Environmental Protection Agency, data to get to that conclusion. And I was so surprised reading this because I was like, what is it about the Bronx that explains this number one ranking on this list? Is it a particular site? Is it a particular, can we point to something that would inform people of why this is happening here? And all of this research that's coming out, I mean, it confirms something that people living in the community have known for a really long time, myself included, that sometimes where you are living affects the place or affects your health in the place that you are living. It's fascinating to see this with things like asthma or with things like diabetes. There are so many factors that influence our health that it surprises me each day to find out something new. So these studies are kind of making all of this clear, kind of reinforcing what people have known for a really long time, but adding urgency because COVID-19 is happening. It's a pandemic that we're all living through right now.
Absolutely. And I say for those viewers who may not be familiar as to what environmental inequality looks like in the Bronx, does it look like factories around you? Is it car pollution? What are some of the factors that contribute to environmental inequality in our borough?
That's an excellent question. There are a mix of factors that contribute to poor health. When we think of the environment, you can think about things like living near a highway or siting near maybe like a sewage site or living in a place where the quality of housing perhaps is more run down, or if there are other like lead, like all of these kind of physical factors that influence the way that we live are things that can distinguish a community from being a community where there is environmental justice or environmental injustice. And a lot of the Bronx, so many people know, lots of people are living near highways. They're living in places where they're exposed to a lot of truck traffic. They're living in places with these deteriorating housing conditions. There are a number of factors that inform our portrait of health, and a lot of these things have a lot more influence than even I knew or lots of other folks know.
Right. And you also open your story with Alicia Bure. Alicia is a mom who realized her son was less susceptible to an asthma attack at the beginning of the pandemic, when less cars were on the road, of course. Alicia also lost her mother-in-law to COVID-19. Ese, can you tell us about the Bronx families you've spoken to, like Alicia's family, and how their long-lived realities often fell on deaf ears, but are now coming to light through this pandemic?
Yeah, Alicia Bure is an amazing woman. Her strength and her resilience to get this obituary out of her grandmother-in-law, to speak up about some of these things and kind of raise awareness of it is amazing to me. I think, I mean, again, there's a line in the story where another person says, well, we all know someone with asthma. How many of us, the folks listening, the folks watching, know somebody with asthma who lives in the Bronx? I mean, there's so many people, myself included, it's like, this is almost something that affects so many of us. And hearing from one parent who said, well, my child has asthma, or I developed asthma, or, I mean, there is almost no one that I know personally who is not touched by this in some way. And I think Bronx families are incredibly resilient. I mean, in Alicia's case, it took a pandemic for her to realize, for it to like fully become clear for her that the place that they were living in was influencing her son's health to such a degree. You know, to add just a little bit more information on her, she has 2 children. Her oldest son did not grow up as close to the Deegan and the Cross Bronx as her youngest son did. The older son does not have asthma. The younger son does. So, I mean, in that case, it's almost like an anecdote that makes really clear that this is such an important difference in people's lives.
Wow, such a juxtaposition in the same family. No, one child asthma, the other no, and you can kind of relate to why this is. One lives where the highway is and the other doesn't. We also have something called Asthma Alley here in the Bronx. It's an invisible alley, but we know that this is where there's a lot of air pollution and, huge asthma rates as well as diabetes as well. Through COVID-19, I feel like a lot of people are also learning how our direct environment, not only the air, but our environment, the lack of food, food justice, inequality, all of these things that impact us have been tied to the COVID-19 rates of death and also just the rates of infection here in the Bronx as well. Ese, can you also tell us about the city's Missing Them database and how this piece came from researching that database on the city's website?
So Missing Them is one of the more amazing things that I've ever worked on as a journalist. This is an effort to document the lives of every single New Yorker who died from COVID-19. This is tens of thousands of people, and we're making our way kind of through every single person, calling family members and friends, talking to people, getting these crowdsourced obituaries, talking to people in unions. I mean, the work and the stories that have come out of that are amazing. Something, like Alicia mentioning her son's asthma, it may seem like a passing comment, but you think about it and it's like so much of how people lived and how they died is important to the history of like the world, because the United States is such a hotspot for COVID-19, and the Bronx at a point was the epicenter, and the epicenter that was New York City. I mean, it's amazing to be able to contribute something to this. It does not cost anything to have this obituary included. We know that cost is often a big factor in keeping folks who are from more diverse backgrounds. Most obituaries tend to be of white men, keeping them from accessing obituaries. So please, 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 if you are a person who has lost a family member, who has lost a friend from this virus, you can contact us by email, tips at the city or missing them at the city. You can text remember to 73224. You can email me, you can email us. Please help us document the lives of and honor the memory of the folks that we have lost from this virus.
And Ese, was this database born after you wrote this other article at the city? It's titled Bronx Residents Twice as Likely to Die from COVID-19. Was this born after the database?
That's an independent, Missing Them is an independent project that is using different sources to build out this data, including crowdsourcing. But the story that I wrote that you referenced is from a separate bit of reporting.
Gotcha. And before we go, we want to also discuss that. I remember I saw that headline and it kind of impacted me. Bronx residents twice as likely to die from COVID-19. And immediately I was just like, why? Why is this happening in the Bronx? And I'm glad that the database is created now so we can finally put names and faces to these numbers that were coming out in the beginning of the pandemic. But just a little bit about that piece as well and why it's important to highlight the issues here in the Bronx that contribute to the high rates of COVID-19.
Yeah, I mean, it breaks my heart on a personal level I have struggled with am I going to write another negative story about how the Bronx is being affected by COVID? I want people to know more than anything how we are uniquely vulnerable in some ways to contracting the virus and to folks dying from this virus. The reason I take air quality so seriously and the reason I wanted to write about it so much was, one is personal. So growing up in the Northeast Bronx, my dad always tells the story of coming into the nursery one day and I was like struggling to breathe. And he was like, what's going on? And he takes me to the hospital. They thought I was having an asthma attack. My parents are Nigerian. They immigrated to the Bronx. Neither of them had anyone in their family who had asthma. That was not a thing that they knew very much about. I get a little older. My parents moved to the suburbs. My asthma in 1 or 2 years is so much less severe that I don't need to take daily medication. And since that time, I've never needed it again. And that was one of the examples for me that really solidified, like, where you live matters, like what you are exposed to matters. And it's so much more urgent with COVID and air quality, to offer the second reason. If you don't want to live near a toxic waste site, a lot of us in a lot of cases can choose not to do that. If you know that your water supply is contaminated in some way, so many of us can buy bottled water. But air, we're breathing it in every day. Like, you can't just say, oh, let me like close my lungs off while I get to a different location with better air quality. It's been life and death, and it's even more so now that we have a viral pandemic circulating. So this is important stuff. Thank you so much for having me on this show and helping me get this information to the public.
Thank you, Ese, for your time, and thanks for your contribution in journalism with your poignant pieces and very important pieces on the city's website. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Folks, to read Ese's powerful piece on environmental justice as it relates to COVID-19 and other stories investigating the effects of coronavirus in New York City and our borough here in the Bronx, you can visit thecity.nyc. Also, follow Ese on Twitter at Ese Olumhense. We'll be right back.